Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Messner. I am the Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Chief for the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services. My main role is to help get disasters declared after we've had hazard events come through the state, as well as overseeing our different hazard mitigation programs that can help prevent future damages. If you're joining us here today, it's because you're here for the Disaster 4760 Applicant Briefing meeting. 4760 is the federal disaster number that was assigned to the state of North Dakota for our ice storm that impacted us over Christmas. It lasted from December 25th through December 27th of 2023, and we were able to validate over $11 million in damages, which was more than enough for our state to request federal aid, which was subsequently approved. Before I pass this over to Brent Call, who's our Public Assistance Officer, and he's going to be doing the majority of the meeting for us here today, there's just a couple things I would just like to do for housekeeping purposes. Number one, this meeting is being recorded. We are going to put it on YouTube, on our private YouTube channel after the meeting is done, and then I'll send out the link for that video to everybody here, as well as everybody else who I had tried to blast, information out to earlier, so that if there's anybody who wasn't able to participate, they will still have to, view the video after the fact. While also, if there's anybody who wants to re-watch it, they'll have that ability as well. Secondly, we do ask that everybody stay on mute. If you have questions, go ahead and put those into the chat, and then we'll get to those at the very end. And then the last thing, if you could also go into the chat and just let us know who you're representing. That way we can keep track of which applicants have participated or viewed the applicant briefing and which ones still need to do that, because that is a requirement for every applicant that it comes in underneath the public assistance program to attend the applicant briefing meeting for that event. With that being said, I did want to pass it over real quick. Is Ricky on from FEMA? No, he must not be. He said he might not have a chance, but James Ricky Stevenson is the federal coordinating officer for this event, and I was just going to let him, take a moment to introduce himself to you all. He's primarily out of the Region 8, which is in Denver, but he is going to be the FCO for Disaster 4760.
Thanks, Justin. I did pop in, and we're having a little lagging issues here on our end. But hey, everybody, not really a lot on my end for everybody other than just welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here. We've got a great team of folks here with our state partners and some of our FEMA staff to be able to provide you guys with a lot of information here. So there's a lot to take in, but we've got some great staff, with North Dakota being state-led in the public assistance and mitigation arenas. They've got a great team, an experienced team to be able to help you guys through this process. But my job here is to make sure that we also have the federal resources to support them where needed as well as on that. So we're here to support. Glad to be here, but that's all I've got, Justin. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Ricky. All right, I will pass it over to Brent Call. He is our Public Assistance Officer. One last thing, and I always like to say this before we go into this, because this is a pretty long meeting. There's a lot of information in here. You don't feel overwhelmed, with all the information. There's a lot of intricacies that go along with the PA program. You will be assigned a state staff member who will work with you and will guide you through the process. The applicant briefing is something we have to do to, explain the program, explain the incident period, deadline dates, what's eligible, what's not eligible. We go through all of this, but you will have somebody who will be holding your hand. But at the same time, if you do have questions prior to getting assigned a state staff member, reach out to myself or Brent anytime. That's one of our main reasons why we're here, is to help everybody get through this process and help you guys get reimbursed for all your eligible expenses. So with that, Brent, I will pass it over to you, man, and I will shut up.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to start off saying thank you to all the people that participated in the PDA. It was fantastic, a product that we were able to submit to the governor and then get to FEMA. Everybody did a great job, and I think we got this disaster declared faster than we've ever had a disaster declared in the history of this program. So just thank you everybody that participated in the PDA. It was a real good group effort here. So with that, we'll get started. If you guys have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. Jerry will be monitoring that, our TFL, Gerald Miller, as we go through. So if you guys do have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, and Jerry will try to respond to those as soon as he can. If you can't, we'll get back to you with the correct answer. All right, so we're looking at DR4760. That's a disaster that was declared just a couple of weeks ago. Declaration date was February 15th, 2024 for winter storm, snowstorm, and straight line winds. The incident period was between December 25th, 25th and 27th, 2023. This disaster does have a cost share. The federal government will be picking up 75% of all costs, the state 10%, and the local share will be 15%. Public assistance for emergency work and repair and replacement of disaster-related damages was obligated during this event. Certain counties were identified as well: Barnes County, Cass, Dickey, Grant, LaMoure, Logan, McIntosh, Ransom, Richland, Sargent, Steele, Stutsman, and Traill. Those are the counties that were declared during the event, and the damages must have occurred in those counties or they don't count. Hazard mitigation grant program was also established during this disaster. We'll get into that a little bit more, but there's two types of hazard mitigation, 406 and 404. Justin will be discussing the 404 a little bit more in depth here as we get through the presentation. Just a map of the affected counties. The ones in yellow did not get declared, although we did, or no, excuse me, that's incorrect, but just a map of the disaster here. Okay. So like we said, the declaration was February 15th, 2024, and that's going to start the clock on all timelines for the FEMA program. Category A, debris work, that work is due or has to be done by August 15th, 2024. Same thing with Category B work, August 5th, 2024. You're given 6 months to complete that work from the date of declaration. Permanent work, Category C through G, you get 18 months to get that work done. That's going to put us out to August 15th, 2025. We also have the last category, your project management costs, Category Z. Typically, you have 180 days after you have completed the last non-management cost PA project, and we'll get into a little more detail about that in a bit here. You're going to start by filling out your RPA in the grants portal and grants manager system. This is where we're going to be doing a majority of our work. Your PDMG, like Justin had said, that's going to be assigned to you. He'll help you walk through the software, and we'll be doing a majority of the work in the software for you, but you will need to be able to access your account within grants portal, grants manager. All projects are reviewed by FEMA through this system. They're sent down to the Consolidated Resources Center in Denton, Texas, where they're reviewed for their damage, their scope of work, costing, and permitting. Like I said, we need to get that RPA filled out, and right now there's only 2 RPAs that we have for the state right now. So we are requesting that you guys get those RPAs in as soon as possible. There is a deadline for those. Justin sent out an email last week with directions on how to get that request for public assistance filled out and sent in. But there are some emails here, or some email sites and websites where you can get that information too. But Justin's email is pretty thorough. If you guys did not get that email, let us know and we'll get it out to you. But that RPA deadline is only a couple of weeks away here, so we want you to make sure you get that filled out before before the deadline. If you have any issues with that, please contact Nadine Junt there at the bottom. Her name and number right there. She'll be able to help you get in if you're having any troubles. We're also using the state software Civics. This is going to be after your grant has been written and obligated. This is where a lot of your documentation is going to be stored. This is where we do our large project closeouts. We can submit requests for reimbursement through this program, and just a number of things to help you manage your grant here. So you will be working in 2 softwares, grants portal when we're writing the project, and then once the project has been obligated, a majority of your work is going to take place in the Civics system. That's the state software. Again, if you have issues with either one of these softwares, please call Nadine, name and number, and email down there. She's very helpful when it comes to these programs. All projects and support documentation will be contained within the FEMA grants portal and Civics. So you're going to have 2 spots where you'll be able to see all support documentation. Reimbursement requests and payments will still be processed through the Civic system. So that's what the state software is for processing those payments. FEMA doesn't have, or Grants Portal doesn't have the capability of processing those payments. That's why we have that Civics program. So 4 phases with the PA project. Right now, we're kind of in phase 1, about to enter phase 2 here after the applicant briefing. But phase 1, that's our PDA and our declaration. That's where we're at right now. Phase 2 is when you're going to be assigned that program delivery manager, and we're going to help you write your projects that we're eventually going to be sending down to the CRC in phase 3. In phase 3, the CRC and FEMA will have an opportunity to review your projects for accuracy and costing. And at that point, once they give those projects the all clear, they'll be sent back to you in phase 4 for your review and approval. If there's any mistakes or errors, or if we missed anything, that's going to be your opportunity to go back and take another look at that project in its final form. For the most part, this is going to be a pretty quick disaster. We don't intend to see a lot of site inspections. I think a majority of the work is done out there. So we were going to be using the virtual site inspection method here. So we're just going to be looking at photos, using your records to confirm damages, things like that. If we do need to go out and look at sites, we will. If there's questionable sites or discrepancies with DDDs, things like that. But, you know, we're really only looking at a few categories here, A, B, and F, and don't really see a need for site inspections this year. These are your basic building blocks of PA eligibility. You have to be eligible as an applicant. Your facility must be eligible. The work that you're performing must be eligible, and the cost must be eligible. Eligible applicants are state and local government agencies, counties, cities, towns, districts, and regional authorities. And the majority of this event, certain private nonprofits, it's our rural electric cooperatives. Eligible PNPs, I'm not going to get too much into this, but most of the RECs that are participating in this event have participated in the past, so we do have that information, or at least we've gone through this motion, but you will need that ruling from the US IRS that was in effect at the time of the declaration. Documentation from the state substantiating it is a non-revenue producing nonprofit entity. PNP facilities must determine eligible based on a facility that can provide critical or non-critical services. Right now, all the RECs that we're seeing do provide that or meet that metric of critical services. But just want to go over this slide. If you are considered a non-critical PNP, more likely the best we can do is just a small business loan. So the rural electrics, we don't have any issues with that, but if there are any non-critical PNPs out there, just FYI, it typically ends in a small business loan. Eligible facilities, in general, a facility must be determined eligible for the work to be eligible. That's going to be building, work, system, or equipment. The facility must be owned and maintained by an eligible applicant. Must be active at the time of the event and may be an improved or maintained natural feature. That's just kind of a maybe. I'll get into more of that a little bit here. Eligible facilities, roads, bridges, lift stations, water control facilities, buildings, systems, such as mechanical, electrical, RECs, things like that. Non-eligible facilities, unimproved property, hillsides, slopes, forests, natural channels. Exceptions can be made for stabilization if it threats public safety, and non-eligible facilities, agricultural purposes. So I don't think we're going to see any emergency slope stabilization in this event, but we can participate if it does threaten that public safety. Eligible work must be required as a result of the disaster incident. PA grant funding for 2 types of work, permanent work and temporary work. We'll kind of break those out here in a little bit, but there are different rules and standards when we're talking temporary work compared to permanent work. Work must be located within the designated area just like we were identified those counties at the beginning, that damage and work must be within that eligible county. It must be the legal responsibility of the applicant. So, you know, the cities that have incurred that damages, they must come under their own RPA. They can't come under the county, things like that. It has to be their authority, their eligible facility. Work must provide permanent restoration to the pre-disaster design, function, and capacity of the facility. Work completed must demonstrate that damages were caused directly by the declared incident. FEMA does not provide PA funding for deterioration, deferred maintenance, failures to take measures to protect the facility from future damages, or negligence. I don't really see any of that going on when we did that PDA, so I think we're doing well there. When necessary to validate the completed work, the applicant is required to provide documentation supporting pre-disaster condition of the facility, and photos of the damage are required. Eligible work. Work must bring the site back to its pre-disaster function, capacity, and design. Work beyond that pre-disaster design and function, we can authorize it, but we want that to be pre-approved by NDDES or FEMA. But that's going to be through our 406 mitigation program, alternate project program, or the improve project program. Again, we'll help you every step of the way with these nuances with working outside of the pre-disaster design. Eligible cost directly tied to the performance of eligible work. It must be adequately documented with invoices, force count, labor, and equipment, mutual aid, things like that. It must be reduced by all applicable credits, insurance, and salvage. If you guys do received insurance or salvage costs, those must be deducted from what you get from FEMA. Costs must be necessary and reasonable to accomplish the work, and properly documented and compliant with all those regulations, state, local, environmental, permitting, historic. It is a federal grant, so a lot of requirements. The site tracker, I know those of you that participated in the PDA did a really great job with the site tracker, and that was one of the reasons why we got this PDA completed so quickly. But we are still, that is a living document, and I hope you guys are updating that since we last spoke about 6 weeks ago. But the site tracker helps us develop the damage inventory, which is that comprehensive list of your sites. It's a logical grouping of your sites. It's grouped by county location, grouped by category, and environmental concerns. And I just kind of highlighted that county location for the RECs. You know, we want to make sure we identify where those damages took place in which county. Hope Cass County Electric doesn't mind. They did a great job with their site tracker. This is just an example, and a lot of you guys did a great job. I just kind of grabbed this one off the bat, but you know, site name, county location, GPS, description of the work and the cost, the percentage of work completed. Again, everybody did a real good job with these, but this is just kind of a good example that we saw for the RECs. For the cities and the smaller communities with the Cat A and the Cat Bs, Ransom County did a great job here with theirs, identifying how much work was involved, what they were doing. I think we have a total cubic yards of debris removed here. So again, just another good example of a site tracker for the two types of damage we're really emphasizing in this event. Like Justin had said earlier, we are going to assign you a program delivery manager. We don't have a real big event here or a lot of applicants. I think our PDMGs are going to be assigned to just 2 applicants this event. So you and one other one, it should be pretty easy, pretty quick here. But PDMG will be assigned to you to help you all the way through this process. The first thing we're going to do is establish that exploratory call. That's going to be a call between you, the applicant, and your PDMG. FEMA Environmental has requested to be on part of those calls if they can be on those calls. So you might expect them to be on there as well. During the exploratory call, we'll be discussing your specific damages, needs, and expectations, and we'll then set up that date for your recovery scoping meeting. So the exploratory call is just kind of a quick 10-15 minute call. And that's when we're going to establish that recovery scoping meeting, and that's going to be a little more in-depth meeting on the program and what we're going to be requiring of you. The recovery scoping meeting, typically we've been doing these virtually as well. In the past, we did these in person, but with technology today, the virtual site inspection or the virtual recovery scoping meeting has been successful. The recovery scoping meeting will be tailored to your specific needs based on the exploratory call. All parties are encouraged to attend, so whoever is, relevant in capturing these costs or these damages, who was out there, who somebody who maybe will answer some of our questions, we encourage them to attend. Reestablish your specific damages, needs, and expectations, and identify any special projects that may need engineering expertise, bridges, buildings, anything that may require additional state or FEMA assistance. We'll get that established at the recovery scoping meeting here. Maps, everybody did a great job with their maps. I think we got one from almost everybody during the PDA, but maps are required. It's an environmental obligation. All sites are required to have a map. Your map should show all damaged sites to include the name of the site. Site inspectors and PDMGs will not change the names of your site. We ask that your maps, the name of the site on your map, match the site tracker as well. Entire line segments can be identified as a single site. We don't need to know each individual pole. So if you have a 2-mile line segment, we can get that GPS at the start of that segment and at the end of that segment. We don't need necessarily every single pole, every single wire. Most of the work here that I've seen so far during the PDA is completed or probably is completed now. So we're not going to run into a lot of work to be completed cost estimates. I know there are some out there, but we are looking for you guys to establish your pre-disaster costs for work to be completed. For your work completed stuff, we're going to take your actual stuff, your actual costs. But the work to be completed, we want these estimates from you guys. We want to make sure you're getting every penny you can get, and every local cost that's going to be relevant to putting your facility back to its pre-disaster capacity. So yeah, I think we're only looking at the RACs that'll be supplying us with those engineers estimates, but that has been successful for us in the past. So if you guys do have work to be completed out there, just let us know. Make sure you guys are getting quotes or establishing your pre-disaster costs through engineers estimates, things like that. We can help you through this process. For the work that is completed, contractors' invoices, we're just talking contract work at this time. Invoices must include the following: quantity of material placed, identify the location, the section lines, identify the site, the date, invoice number, name of the contractor or mutual aid, equipment used to include hours, and date of work. Please review your invoices for accuracy prior to submitting them to NDDES. We get a lot of invoices that are just kind of passed through to us, and we end up having to go back to the applicant. So take a few moments before you pass those on, make sure everything looks right, and it's just a matter of making sure we get your grant submitted to you accurately. Required documentation for force account labor. FEMA refers to the applicant's personnel as force account. FEMA reimburses force account labor based on actual hourly rates plus the cost of the employee's actual fringe benefits. Your fringe benefits do have a cost, and we want to make sure we capture that. The whole idea of this program is to make you whole again. So your fringe costs for your employees, if they are receiving those benefits, we want to know the holiday leave, accrued vacation, sick leave, Social Security, so on and so forth. We want those costs to make sure you are made whole. Required documentation for force count labor, timesheets, description of work performed, hours worked, dates worked, name of employees, job title, so on and so forth. So want all that information. Typically, only force count overtime is eligible for Category B. Some exceptions apply. Excuse me. We'll kind of get into that as we go on. There is a uniqueness to RECs when we have that lights on and lights off period, but generally only overtime is eligible under Category B work. Just an example of the applicant benefit calculation sheet. A lot of folks are kind of moving away from this this form, and most people just kind of have this saved in their accounting software. But these are typically the breakdowns that we're looking for these. Force account equipment. FEMA provides PA funding for the use of applicant-owned equipment or force account. Required documentation for force account equipment that we want to know the dates used, hours used, detailed list of equipment to include horsepower, capacity, and size. The site identified where the work took place, the operator name, and equipment hours must match force count labor hours. What we kind of mean by that is if you have a truck out there for 6 hours working on any kind of a project and an employee that's only out there for 2 hours, that just doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. That piece of equipment must have typically a laborer operating at all times if you're going to be claiming those hours for equipment. FEMA rates versus local rates. FEMA has established their equipment cost codes, or equipment rates. FEMA provides PA funding for equipment usage based on the lower of either the local rate or the FEMA rate. There's a link to the current FEMA equipment rates right there. Your PDMG will have a copy of these. He'll be checking against your local rates, and you will be getting the lower of the two if there is a matching piece of equipment between your inventory and the force account equipment FEMA cost codes. Equipment with no established rate. If FEMA does not have a rate established for that equipment, the applicant may either submit a rate for approval or request that FEMA provide a rate. If the applicant submits a rate, it must include documentation demonstrating that each component of the rate is comparable to the current market price. If the rate cannot be based on the rate cannot be based on rental rates, as such rates include cost components such as profit that are above and beyond what is necessary to operate and maintain force account equipment. So if you guys do have some of those rates, your PDMG will be going over that with you, and we can establish a rate and submit it to the CRC. And if it's documented properly, demonstrating those components and the fair market value, we should be able to get that submitted down there. So I do probably see this happening, this event, and your PDMG will help you through those costs and trying to get that reasonable cost established. Required documentation for rented equipment, work completed. Funding is based on the terms of the rental agreement. Rental price must not exceed the cost of the purchasing and maintaining of that equipment. Required documents for any claims on rented equipment. We need that rental agreement, the invoice, and the details of the equipment that's being rented. Insurance requirements. Applicants must submit copies of all insurance documents to include insurance policy with all data, declarations, endorsements, inclusions, schedules, and other attachments or statement of loss. Typically what we're looking for is every project goes through some type of insurance review, or it does go through insurance review, categories D through G. So even though you may not be carrying insurance on your facility, FEMA is still required to go through the exercises of making sure that you don't have insurance on that. So your insurance policies are required. We do want you to include that list there that I have pulled up on the slide. You can either upload that into the grants portal at the event level or get that to your PDMG and they'll get that uploaded as well. But it is a requirement. All permanent work categories D through G are required to go through an insurance review. Maintenance records to demonstrate that the facility was regularly maintained and in good operational order prior to the incident are required. Applicant must provide maintenance records or documentation establishing a routine maintenance program. I'm sorry, that should say upload maintenance agreement into FEMA grants portal at the event level as well, just like the insurance document. Required documentation for materials. The cost of supplies include materials is eligible if the purchase if purchased and justifiably needed to effectively respond and or recover from the incident, can be taken from the applicant's stock or used for the incidents and used for the incident. Items from the applicant's stock need to be tracked from the inventory withdrawal records. Funding can be based on actual invoices or historical costs. If invoices are not available, PA funding will be based on the applicant's established method of pricing or historical data or price from vendors. We're going to talk about this briefly. I think EHP will get into this as well, but any material that was mined during the repair of your event or repair of your facilities, gravel, things like that, it does need to come from a certified source, either from the State Historical Preservation Office or the North Dakota Department of Transportation. The SHPOs, we call them, from the Historical Preservation Office, they need to be updated annually. The DOT typically do not need to be updated annually. They're usually good for the life of the pit, but I think Charlie will talk about that a little bit more. We will need the GPS location of those pits if any material was used in the repairs for your facilities. Just an example of the DOT material source, what it looks like, and one from the State Historical Preservation Office. We typically, have a lot of gravel roads damages during our declarations, but we still like to go over these slides just in case material was used. Again, please review all documentation prior to submitting to NDDES. We just want to make sure everything is accurate and up to par here before we submit it down to the CRC. Next, we'll be going over the categories of work. Like I said earlier, there are two types of work: the emergency work, which is considered temporary, and the permanent work, categories C through G, which we consider permanent. We'll also be talking about the essential elements of information, or the EEIs. This is a series of questions that are generated based on the project that we create in the grants portal system. Your PDMG will answer these questions with you or for you, and it's just like I said, it's just a series of questions that are category specific, work specific, cost specific. Category A, emergency work, is considered temporary work, debris removal. It must eliminate immediate threats to lives, public health, and safety, eliminates immediate threats of significant damage to improve public or private property, and ensures economic recovery. Debris includes, but not limited to, vegetative, construction, demolition debris, sand, mud, silt, gravel, rock. Applicant must provide location of GPS of debris removal to include culverts and construction material. I know power poles or electrical poles typically are given out to farmers. Just let us know if you guys did that or engaged in that activity. FEMA is going to want to know where those broken poles went. Debris removed not eligible for federally maintained navigable channels and waterways. Flood control works under the authority of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Agricultural land or natural or unimproved land, such as heavily wooded areas and unused areas. Debris on public property eligible for removal except in wilderness, tree claims, and other unused areas. Debris on private property, I don't see a lot of this happening. It's ineligible under most circumstances, but it would require the owner to move the debris to the right of way. If authorized by the state, tribal, local government, may be eligible if it presents a safety or health hazard, so on and so forth. I haven't gotten any reports on this of local communities removing this type of debris, but if you do, or you did engage in that, let us know right away, and your PDMG will help you work through those costs. Debris on federal aid roads eligible for removal only if the Federal Aid Highway System Administration doesn't claim the damages themselves. So these are kind of some of those EEI questions you're going to see in Category A. Contract work: how was the contract procured? How was the debris activity monitored. That's a big one. That's something that FEMA's been really enforcing over the past event here. They're going to want to know how that cubic yards of material was established between you and your contractor. They want to make sure that all the debris that's being removed was coming from the right of way, was agreed upon prior, things like that. They're going to want to know the type of debris, the total cubic yards of the material removed. How is the quantity of the debris determined? How is the debris disposed of? That's a big one. We wanted that location of the debris disposal to include the GPS. Was it chipped? Was it burned? What were done with the ashes? Was there any permit if burning occurred? Lots of stuff here with the category A, lots of environmental issues. Just a last point, you cannot permanently dispose of debris in a floodplain. That's a big no-no. We'll go on to category B, emergency protective measures. All Cat B measures must eliminate or lessen immediate threat to lives, public safety, health, or eliminate or lessen immediate threats of significant additional damage to improve private property in a cost-effective manner. List of eligible protective measures, security such as barricades, emergency operations centers. I think we have a few of those that are similar to that, warming or opening up community doors when power was down, emergency access, supplies and commodities, medical care, evacuation. Don't see a lot of that happening here, but just some examples. If you guys did go through those processes, let us know. So again, some of those EEI questions for category B: what work was accomplished? What were the supplies, equipment, and personnel doing? Barricades, don't see any barricades in this one, or emergency access here, but basically what we want you guys to do is just list the activities that took place during that emergency operation time period. What were you doing? What costs were associated with what you were doing? Fuel charges, pumps, things like that, whatever that was. We kind of want to see that detailed narrative on what you were doing, and we'll be able to match up those costs with the activities that you guys were doing back in December. So like I said, tip, you will need to describe all your costs in your damage description, and your PDMGs will be able to help you with that. Donated resources. I haven't seen a lot of this, but they are out there for category B. So if you do have some donated resources from some of the local residents there, we can capture some of those costs. FEMA does not provide PA funding for donated resources. However, the applicant may use the value of your donated resource to offset the non-federal share. So, real quick, if you have a $10,000 project, your local share is going to be $1,500. If you can show us that you had $1,500 in donated resources, that essentially can wipe out that local share of that 15%. But again, just get that information to your PDMG and we'll help you work through the details of that. Funding for donated resources are typically paid to the applicants at the closure of event. I don't know if that's going to be the case in this one since it's so small. I think a majority of those costs may be able to be paid out up front, but typically we need to make sure that the project is closed and all the costs are completed prior to closeout. But in this case, we may be able to release that funding ahead of time. Okay, so yeah, just kind of what I just went over again. Donated resources from the third party or a private entity. The applicant uses resources in the performance of eligible and emergency work. The applicant or a volunteer organization must track the resources and work performed, including description, specific locations, and hours. Types of donated resources, we're talking volunteer labor, donated equipment, donated materials, and donated buildings or land or transfer of ownership. We have never seen that fourth category, but if you guys did have some reason to do that, let us know. The current volunteer rate is $30.69 an hour for North Dakota. So if you guys did keep track of your donated hours or labor hours, we're going to apply that $30.69. rate to those hours. We also can capture permanent work donated resources. Now, while the donated resources for categories A and B, that's going to be reflected at that total category A and B costs. However, for permanent work, it's going to be specific to that project. So again, don't really see a lot of this out there, but if you guys do have donated resources for permanent work, let us know right away, and your PDMG will help you get through that. Category C, we haven't, for roads and bridges, we didn't see any damages during the PDA on this stuff. But, you know, if damages to roads incurred during the performance of eligible work, categories A and B, let us know. We might be able to capture those costs, but damages to your roads, you know, we need those dimensions, length, width, and depth. For example, surface gravel washed over area 150 by 18 by 2 inches deep. But not seeing any of this yet, nothing popped up, but it is a eligible category under this declaration. Haven't seen any water control facilities here, so I'm not going to go over this too much, but category D is part of this event. This can include dams, reservoirs, permanent levees, flood walls, etc. But we aren't seeing any of this so far. Same thing with buildings. Haven't seen any category E public buildings or equipment at this point, but if you guys do have those damages from the ice storm, let us know right away. All structural and non-structural components, including mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, are eligible. Furnishings, building restoration, building replacement, building relocation, those are all eligible. But again, we're not really seeing a lot of that. Category F, utilities, that's our big category for this event. This is probably going to soak up at least 95% of our costs here. Utilities include water storage, power generation, natural gas, sewage collections, power lines, generators, substations, all that stuff that we're kind of here for today. We'll talk a little bit about in depth on the category F with the rural electric cooperatives. We've been kind of going after this lights on period and after lights on period. And this is what we've been using successfully to kind of categorize your work. When the last customer is identified as having their power restored, we consider that the lights on period. It signifies the end of the emergency protective measures. And what that means is that we're going to have to start looking at procurement standards once those lights are back on and the emergency operation has ended. We're going to be back into permanent work, and those procurement standards will now be enforced. How we categorize the category F, or the utilities work, the work that you're doing in nature is permanent, but the activity getting those lights on is emergency work. So we can categorize this stuff as permanent work under category F, even though the nature of it is emergency work. At the end of the day, the work is permanent. We're not going back over it. So that's kind of how we established, or why we established, that lights on period or that lights off period. Your PDMGs are aware of this. They'll go over that with you in detail. And I think during our last 4 events for the RECs, you guys have done a great job with this, breaking those costs out for us. The NISC, National Information Solutions Cooperative, I'm assuming that all the RACs are using this. I haven't came across one that doesn't use the software, but we are looking for specific information from these, from the system. Your payroll reports, contractor invoices, material invoices, asset management reports, inventory reports. We'll get a little bit more into detail here on the next slide. So Justin, or we sent this out to everybody. Hopefully the RECs got it, but a detailed list of what we're looking for, what NISC reports that we want to see to verify the damages that you guys incurred. So for your force account labor, we want that payroll labor distribution detail by general ledger account. We want that by month. verification of the payroll distribution in dollars by employee and work order. Payroll labor distribution history. This is for the verification to allow exclusion of secondary overhead costs. Payroll labor detailed by employee by month. Employee actual pay rates and employee actual benefits. That's what we're going to get from that report. Payroll labor time entry detail by employee. This will give us hours worked by day, by pay code, and work order. Fleet miles, hours by employee, and their per diem. So that's kind of what we're looking for when it comes to that force account labor. Payroll labor employee profile. This will give us the employee names, salary, hourly, pay rate, union or non-union, or title. And at the end of the day, you know, if we don't get these exact reports, this is still the information that we need. I know there's a number of reports that can be pulled from the system, and everybody kind of does it a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, again, this is what we're looking for, this information. Force account equipment, fleet asset master, that's going to be the verification of the fleet information. Fleet management work order detail by work order. This will give us our fleet description, miles, hours, applicant dollars. The work order, this is kind of a big one. We want that work order analysis that identifies the material amounts and quantities placed or used during the repair. The labor amounts, the fleet amounts, accounts payable, transactions, general ledger, miscellaneous transaction, and indirect overhead costs. The work order summary, this is used to verify the total cost of each work order and all work orders. And just, you know, that's just kind of a matter of us making sure we're capturing everything and we're not missing anything. So some of the EEI questions for category F, be aware of your codes and standards. There's going to be a lot of that when it comes to updating or upgrading some of your polls, and a lot of that is eligible, but we just need to go through those proper steps. When we're talking codes and standards, we'll go over that here in a little bit as well. Prior to the disaster, was a facility under construction or scheduled for repair or replacement? That does matter. Does the facility have insurance? Like I said earlier, utility pole and line disposal locations are required to include GPS, unless you gave those away to those farmers, but we still want to know where they went. Utility pole size and type are required. Category G, I'm not seeing a lot of this either. Sometimes when you get into category A, debris removal, and category G, parks, recreation, and other, they kind of overlap a little bit. But we're not seeing a lot of category G here. If you are a park coming in, we might categorize your category A like this, but it kind of just depends on the nature of your damages and what other categories of work you might have for these parks. But I'm not seeing anything. We haven't gotten anything from any parks yet at this point, but they are eligible. Category G, the EI questions are kind of generic. Contract work took place, what type of contracts were used, how was the contract procured, describe the condition of the use of the facility prior to the declared event, describe how the facilities were maintained. Many parks are located in floodplains. Permanent storage or disposal of debris in a floodplain, again, is not eligible. Category Z, we're going to talk about that here. That is your project management cost. That is a cost that you guys have been incurring since the preliminary damage assessment, and we can capture those costs. FEMA provides contribution for management costs based on actual costs incurred up to 5% of the subrecipient's total project award amount. You guys, the applicants, are the subrecipients. Activities eligible for management costs, like I said, the preliminary damage assessment, meetings regarding the PA program, site inspections, travel expenses, preparing small and large projects, the recovery scoping meeting today, or that you're going to be working with your PDMG, the applicant briefing today, all of that is eligible for potential reimbursement under category Z. I want to be real clear on this one. The subrecipient may claim costs incurred up to whichever of the following occurs. First, I would say 99% of the time it's going to be 100 days after the subrecipient completes its last non-management cost PA project. So for some of you, that time is already ticking. If the work has been completed, we're only looking at another 6 months to get that work done or to claim those category Z costs. Now, we can always extend that out. We can ask for FEMA to extend it if we're still writing projects, if there's complications with large projects or small projects. But generally, that's what we're looking at, is at 180 days after you complete your work. So how this kind of works, once all of your projects are obligated and written, your PDMG will discuss writing the project management costs PW with you. Applicants will have a choice to choose a estimated cost or actual cost for their category Z project. I think we're going to see a nice mixture of actual and estimated projects here. Actual projects are good for our smaller applicants that have cleaned up their debris, have taken care of their emergency operations. When everything is work completed, there's no additional work really to do with the grant other than processing it. So what we're looking for are actual costs that you have incurred, costs that you have documented to that date. We get into this in much more detail when that time comes, but your PDMG will sit down and discuss which one is going to be more beneficial for you. But if you guys are seeking that actual cost, make sure you are documenting those costs today. Moving forward, same thing with the estimated. We want to make sure you guys are capturing those costs as we go through this. The estimated is going to be better for the large projects, anything over $1 million. If you have a project that exceeds $1 million, you're going to have to go through the large project closeout process, which does add additional project management costs to your application. So estimated, good for those larger projects, while the actual is a little more suited for those smaller projects. These management costs aren't paid out up front. You typically have to request in writing if you want to, if you want to not participate in either of these project management costs, actual or estimated. We'll need that in writing from you that you are waiving your participation in the project management costs. Like I said earlier, the reimbursement requests for category Z, we typically don't pay those out unless they're actual. But if you are working on an estimated project management cost, that request has to come through our Civic software. The reimbursement request must include supporting documentation, the supporting documentation requirements, an explanation of the work performed, to include daily laws, activity reports. Activities must be related to eligible projects. Documentation to support incurred costs for project management costs to include rate of pay, hours worked, benefits. So really what we're looking for with these estimated costs, on the surface, what we're looking for is really just a log of your activities, and the name of the employee, their employee rate, the dates, hours worked, and the activities that they're performing. That's what we're looking for. You still need to maintain your force count records, your timesheets, and all that stuff. But for the most part, we're just looking for those daily logs that you're keeping track of your rates and your hours and what you are doing and how it's related to the event. Documentation to substantiate the necessity of any claimed office supplies or equipment or space. We'll need that. So we'll need those bills if you guys are purchasing anything. The purchases for project management costs for supplies must be justifiable and reasonable for the activity that you guys are performing. For example, we had somebody go out and buy a $4,000 desk. That isn't a reasonable purchase for managing a grant. Applicants should keep records of their costs to justify their need for management cost assistance and provide, these are the documentation or documents we want you to make sure you guys are holding on to at all times. timesheets, applicant benefit calculation sheets, rate of pay, receipts, list of activities. Codes and standards, I mentioned this a little bit earlier here. FEMA does provide PA funding to restore a facility based on pre-disaster design and function with current applicable codes, specifications, and standards. The applicant needs to provide documentation to support the eligibility of the code or standard upgrade, including but not limited to the requirement to apply the code or standard and support that were formally implemented, and uniformly applied. This policy is about 3 pages long. You can find that on the public assistance guide on page 145. We'll get into that a little bit more, and your PDMGs are familiar with the guide as well. But again, it's a few pages long. There's a lot of criteria you might have to meet. And if you guys are looking at upgrading to codes and standards, let your PDMG know right away, and we can help you get through this policy. In order to meet that codes and standard eligible criteria, the codes and standard must apply to the type of restoration required, is appropriate to the pre-disaster use of the facility, is reasonable in writing, formally adopted by the state, local, tribal, or territorial government, and implemented by the applicant on or before the declaration date, or is the legal federal requirement. Must apply uniformly and must be enforced during the time it was in effect. So this is the basic, 5 things you're going to need for these codes and standards. But again, it's a little bit more into in-depth policy than just these 5 points. So if you guys do have that, let your PDMG know let them know right away. We're going to see a lot of this mutual aid with the RECs. This is when the applicant does not have sufficient resources to respond to an incident and may request resources from another jurisdiction through a mutual aid agreement. I've looked at the RECs for years now, and you guys are doing a great job. We just need to make sure we're getting those mutual aid agreements for each one of those agencies you're engaging with. So I don't think we've seen an REC miss one of these yet, but we do need those mutual aid agreements, just an FYI. Procurement. Applicants must comply with federal procurement standards as a condition of receiving PA funding for contract costs for eligible work. Must comply with the most stringent policy between the federal, state, and local procurement procedures. Applicants are responsible for establishing reasonable costs at all times. That's one thing that you want to keep in mind. The procurement policy can get a little muddy, confusing, but at the end of the day, reasonable costs and establishing that at all times is a key idea to keep in your mind when you're completing this federal grant. Reasonable costs are established by seeking multiple quotes, establishing local market costs, and establishing in-place costs. We call it the PDAT manual, the FEMA Procurement Disaster Assistance Team Field Manual, can be found under the grants public assistance section. We have that. I'll show you where you guys can find that if you have any questions. It's a pretty big document. We also have about 9 pages in the public assistance program and policy guide. I'll show you where that's at as well, and your PDMG can help you walk through that. It's just a lot of information to go over. During this applicant briefing, it's a all-day class if we're going to sit through that. These are the local procurement standards, or excuse me, not the local, but the state procurement standards. Bidding, advertising for bidding, that's established at $200,000. So if we are in that permanent work, lights on period, and it's over $200,000, you are required by state standards to bid that work out. Must be advertised by publishing 3 consecutive weeks, at least 21 days before opening the bid. NDDES recommends that all large projects are competitively advertised and bid. This is the procurement purchasing state standards here. They're very similar to the federal standards, but level 1, that's going to be a non-solicited bid or a micro purchase. A level 2, $10,000 to $50,000. Documentation is required. should be seeking out at least 3 vendors. That's for a single purchase. You know, I don't really see this happening a lot, these big ticket items for this disaster, but these are the state standards for procurement. Like I said, federal standards, micro purchases under $10,000. Procurement by micro purchases is the acquisition of supplies, property, or services where the aggregate dollar amount does not exceed the micro purchase threshold. Their standard, federal standard, is higher than the state standard. Theirs is at $250,000. So again, we go by the most stringent policy, which is the state at $200,000. But sealed bids are required for a federal project at $250,000. But again, we have to go to the most stringent one, which is $200,000 at the state policy. Responsibility of another federal entity. Emergency repair of a facility is ineligible if another federal agency has specific authority to provide assistance for that facility. I don't see that happening in this disaster. I haven't seen any of that anywhere, but if you guys are engaging in repairs that are under the authority of another federal agency, they may not be covered. It should be that federal agency's obligation to make those repairs. Permanent work to restore roads and bridges is eligible unless restoration is under a specific authority of another federal agency, such as the FHA. Don't see any of this. We don't really have any road damages this year. Duplication of benefits. FEMA is legally prohibited from duplicating benefits from another source. If the applicant receives funding from another source for the same work, then FEMA funded, FEMA reduces the eligible cost for or deobligates funding to prevent a duplication of benefits. Same thing if you receive funding from another federal agency for the same purpose of the PA funding, it's considered a duplication of benefits. FEMA cannot duplicate funds provided from another federal agency. Local shares, your 15% cannot be funded from another federal source. I think we went over this briefly a little bit earlier in the presentation. Facility scheduled for repair replacement. Facilities that are under contract but are scheduled for repair or replacement using non-federal dollars are eligible provided that the claimed damage did not exist prior to the incident. FEMA may review procurement and contract documents to validate this. If damage exists prior to the incident, only the repair of the damage caused by the incident is eligible. A facility scheduled for replacement within 20 months of the start of the incident period using federal dollars is ineligible. The Inflation Reduction Act, this is kind of something new that we're looking at. The Inflation Reduction Act authorizes financial assistance for costs associated with low carbon building or construction materials. The use of low carbon materials is a voluntary and based on the applicant's discretion. So this is something that you guys can opt into or not. FEMA will fund for low carbon materials, concrete, asphalt, glass, and steel. Higher costs for low carbon material may be funded. Just let your PDMG know if you want to participate in this program. This is something new. This is something that we haven't seen all the way through yet. But if it is something that you guys want to participate in, let us know right away and we can help get the ball rolling. We also have the Red Tape Reduction Working Group. There's a link right there. This group will accept citizens' ideas for cutting red tape. Right now, North Dakota is just kind of a pass-through entity, and this is, directly for FEMA. So if you guys do have ideas about cutting red tape, and there is a lot of it, there is a link right there where we can get those submitted forward. So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to talk about record retention. So at this point, all of your projects would have been obligated, and we're going to kind of go over the specifics of what you need to do for record retention. Small projects are considered any project under $1 million. Work completed or work to be completed projects, you must keep copies of your invoices to show that the scope of work has been completed. copies of your force account records, keep copies of your proof of payments to your contractors, to include canceled checks and warrants. Keep track of your permitting records for environmental compliance. We will kind of go over those environmental compliances here in a little bit. Any procurement records and records of any insurance proceeds. When we are looking at the work that is completed for small projects, the state has to go through a self-certification review with you. So just wanted to let you guys know that when the work is done, there is a final step that we have to do to close out these small projects. We have a great guide that we go over with you after all the projects are obligated. It's called a recovery transition meeting guide. I will encourage your PDMGs to get that to you right away, just to kind of keep you in that mindset of what you need to do down the road and as you go through this grant. So again, once this is obligated and the work is done, we still have a little more work to do closing these out. But yep, I think that's we can kind of save the rest of that during the recovery transition meeting. It's just a little bit out of the element here right now. Small project funding will be paid at obligation. So once your small project is funded and obligated, we'll get that money out to you. You will receive an email notification from the grants or the civics program when your projects are obligated. The email will be provided to you with a link where you can view the project and the supporting documentation. Federal funding is released to the state first, and then a second email will follow once the funding has been transferred to your account. The recipient or the state then forwards the federal and state funding to the applicant or the subrecipient. The funding that you receive must be placed in a non-interest bearing account. We highly recommend to keep the funding in its own account, and the funding must be trackable. Large projects. Large projects are anything that's over $1 million. All large projects are subject to an additional state and federal review after obligation and after the work has been completed. Proof of payments are required as well. We are also requiring that any single site projects that are over $200,000, work to be completed single site projects over $200,000. We're going to carry the same large project closeout standards with that type of a project. And that's just because the state has an obligation to make sure we're following those procurement standards and those environmental standards and things like that. So when we do have those single sites over $200,000, they are going to go through the same closeout process as any other large project. For large projects, keep copies of those invoices to make sure that the scope of work has been completed. Same thing with the force account records. Keep copies of those proof of payments to your contractors, canceled checks, warrants, permitting, and records of any insurance proceeds that you received. We're also looking at any explanation of overruns or underruns that exceed 15% of the original scope of work. So don't really see this happening again. I don't see any work to be completed projects over $1 million here. Continuing on, copies of contracts. Contracts must be signed, and contracts must be enforced. The contracts that you use in the repairs of your facilities, they will be reviewed by FEMA and the state. We want any copies of any change orders and your procurement records. Whatever that is, everything has to be procured and go through that process. So make sure you guys are keeping track of those records. And again, copies of all proof of payment for work completed. So if you guys do have those work completed projects, the subrecipient or the applicant must provide documentation to support the actual costs within 90 days of the work completion. We'll go over that. We have a large project closeout handout that we hand out for applicants that are going to be affected by this. But again, you do have 90 days to get that documentation to us. And the definition of work completion date is right there. So it's not necessarily when you get all of your payments made or the permitting done, things like that. It's when the scope of work has been completed. So again, if we do have those large projects, I'm the large project closeout supervisor. We'll meet with you guys. We'll email back and forth and make sure everybody understands the large project closeout requirements. For large projects, no federal or state funding is paid out upon obligation. Federal funding can be paid once NDDES has completed the large project closeout review. State share funding will be paid once FEMA has reviewed and closed the project. And for some of you that have done this in the past, it is a lengthy process. The state has to review these, FEMA has to review these again, and it does take months and sometimes even years to get that final payout. So for large project, we can release a portion of the funding once certain requirements have met. Procurement policy has been followed, EHP requirements met, scope of work requirements met, proof of payment. The funding must be requested through ND grants. I've worked with a number of you guys in the past on getting these payments out there. For the work completed large projects, it's typically just a matter of getting that proof of payment and then processing that payment on our end. So like I said, when we have these large projects, I'll sit down with you and help you kind of get through all these nuances of the large project closeout. This is just an example of what you're going to see once you do see a project version come through. So this would be once your project is obligated, not necessarily your funding has come through, but once the project hits the state's account, you're going to get an email like this that says your project has been obligated. And it'll contain a link that'll take you to our civics program. And this is what it's going to look like. This is project version 0 of one of the state's projects. So when you do see that obligation hit that state's account, we're going to send you that email. You have a link right here, and you'll be able to find all the support documentation down by that red arrow where you'll be able to find everything that was submitted for the project. Payment. This is, again, another email you're going to be receiving. It's going to look just like this. This is when the payment comes through. You get this email and a link, and this will take you to the state civic software. And again, you can find that support documentation down by that red arrow where you're going to see the invoice, the ACH payment, all the support documentation that's going to apply to that payment. So it's kind of a two-step process once that thing is obligated. So there were some important dates we want to go over. The request for public assistance is due within 30 days of the date of the declaration. That's going to put us to March 16th, 2024. And like I said earlier, we only have 2 applications so far. We're really expecting somewhere around 15. So please get those in as soon as you can. We can't really start this process until you get that RPA in. And once you get it in, we'll get that PDMG assigned to you and the clock will start ticking. But again, the sooner you get us those RPAs, the better. We're really looking at to kind of hit the ground running next week. Starting on Monday, the PDMGs will be here working in the office. We're going to be going over a little bit of training that's specific to the RECs, but we can't really get started until that RPA is filled out and submitted to the state. And even when you fill it out, it's not instantaneous. It does take a few days to go through that process and get approved by the state and FEMA. So again, the sooner you can get these to us, the better, and then we can get started on writing these grants, because we can't get that done started until we see these RPAs. I mentioned that exploratory call earlier. You and your PDMG have 7 days to get that done. Once we assign that PDMG to you, we're thinking, we wanted to start these on Monday, but it's just a tentative date. Not a huge deal. We want to make sure we're trying to hit these metrics of getting that EC call done within the first week. But we go on to that recovery scoping meeting, which is due within 21 days. of the PDMG assignment. So tentatively, if we're starting this Monday on the 4th, we're looking to get that RSM, that recovery scoping meeting, done by March 24th, 2024. These dates are just tentative, but that's kind of what we're shooting for. Clock starts at the declaration date. Again, February 15th, 2024. We can request time extensions for category A and B work, category C through G work. The state can grant a 6-month time extension on category A and B work. The state can also grant a 30 months worth of time extensions for category C through G. Anything beyond that will have to be approved by FEMA. So the state, again, has a limited capacity on how many time extensions we can grant. The grants portal system will notify you when your time extension or your period of performance is coming up. It should be notifying you 90, 60, and 30 days away from the activity completion deadline. I mentioned our recovery transition meeting handout. There's quite a bit of detail on time extensions in there, when to request one, how to request one, so on and so forth. But that's going to be through the FEMA grants portal, not the state civic software, but the FEMA system. We are going to be creating a damage inventory, and this is that list of sites and projects. You will have to sign that damage inventory within 60 days of your recovery scoping meetings. So we're really looking at about 90 days from today, when we need to make sure that you have identified all of your damages. You have 60 days to say, I have this many damages. Don't need necessarily all the support documentation, but you would need to at least to have identified all the damages that occurred to your facilities within those 60 days. Your PDMG will go over this with you a little bit more in detail at the recovery scoping meeting, but it is something that we will regularly let you know about, notify you of those dates that are coming up. After that 60 days, you will not be able to identify any new damages. If you can't identify damages within grants portal, more likely those costs are not going to be eligible. So it's very important that you guys get all those damages to your PDMG as soon as you can. Work completion date. Once work on a project is 100% complete, the applicant must submit documentation for the project within 90 days of the recovery scoping meeting, or within 90 days of the work completion date, whichever is later. So once we do get that recovery scoping meeting established, technically there is a 90-day deadline to get us that work completed documentation. So just keep that in mind, keep that in the back of your heads, that a lot of clocks are ticking with this program, but your PDMGs will help you stay on track. I'm going to take a little break here. We're going to turn this over to Charlie. I'll be back in a little bit to kind of close this up, but for now, I'm going to turn this over to Charlie Bello and his staff with FEMA EHP. So Charlie, go right ahead, and I'll just tell me to flip through the slides when you're ready.
Yep. Brent, first of all, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yep, we can, Charlie.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm real happy to be here. I'm Charlie Bello. I'm a EHP advisor in Denver, Colorado. So I'm going to take about 15 minutes and go through some pretty important material for you. And right now, so I can see the slides being advanced and read some of my notes, I'm going to get off camera. So nice seeing you. Just give me one moment here. Brent, we still good? Audio?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So FEMA EHP, you're going to hear that term a lot. It's Environmental and Historic Preservation Section. We're here to help communities respond, recover from disasters, but we have a legal obligation to comply with a variety of environmental and historic preservation laws, regulations. We are referred to as special considerations, and we support disaster response, recovery, and mitigation, and a whole lot more. The larger EHP Denver, we're based out of Denver Federal Center. Our team has about 80 years of experience. We've worked about 50 disaster declarations in Region 8 and more in other areas of the country. We've been involved with approximately 30,000 project worksheets, PWs, and I like to think that we have probably seen it all, but one never knows. I have personally worked in North Dakota for 14 years, love the state, and I've worked in every one of the 53 counties. Mary Brillante, who is helping me on this disaster, has about 4 years in North Dakota, and she has worked in quite a lot of the counties. Feel free to contact us anytime. We may not have all the answers right away, but I promise you we're going to get back to you as fast as possible. So, bottom line, FEMA is required to consider the effects of a project on the environment, broadly speaking, before we commit to funding. We absolutely hate being the ones that initiate yanking of funds for any kind of EHP violation. We have a great relationship with our state tribal Office of Emergency Management partners. Also, a great relationship with the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, Tribal Historic Preservation Offices, United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps, EPA, Natural Resources Conservation Service, HUD, Department of Ag, etc. This all makes our job easier. We've worked with these people for well over a decade. Okay, so some people still refer to EHP as troublemakers, obstructionists, pains in the butt. This is emphatically not true. We're here to help everyone connected to a disaster event. However, sometimes things do go sideways, but in those cases, we try to rectify issues right away to get applicants the funding you all so well deserve. Communication is key, and from the start at preliminary disaster assessments, EHP will be present on exploratory calls, recovery scoping meetings, and most site inspections, even if they're desktop. So bottom line, again, EHP has a legal obligation to comply with a wide variety of laws, regs, presidential executive orders, acts, policies, etc., even local and tribal ordinances. We assist all parties with the regulatory compliance process. We help expedite permits and clearances to move PWs onto financial obligation. That's really the bottom line. But we don't obtain permits for the applicants. Failure to comply with the laws and regs can delay your projects, maybe deny funding, and cause bad press. And believe me, we don't want any of that. If contractors are used, and they often are, to do the work, it's you, the applicant's responsibility to make sure that they comply with regs, laws, etc. Our green sheets, they outline the laws and regulations, and you all have a copy of the green sheets, electronic copy. EHP, however, also has guidance documents covering rural electric co-op mitigation, floodplain work and floodplain development permits, hydrology, hydraulic studies, mostly involved in upsizing culverts, grade raises, the use of asphalt, concrete, the disposal and potential use of concrete as riprap. We have information on debris burning, bioengineering, Army Corps consultation process, culvert recycling, invasive species, etc., etc. EHP will communicate project worksheet, PW issues, back to the PDMG, and they will inform the applicants. However, since public assistance typically returns damaged sites to pre-disaster condition, and that's material and design, these projects move through our review queues very quickly. The red flags occur when work goes outside the existing construction footprint, or if the work is not restoring to pre-disaster conditions, and that's or when hazard mitigation occurs. Then, obviously, our reviews may take a little bit longer. Brent, thanks for running through the green sheet there for people. So, when an applicant applies for FEMA assistance for a proposed project, it must be reviewed for compliance with about 25 laws, regs, executive orders, etc. We move projects out of our review queues as fast as we possibly can, unless there are issues. And then, believe me, everyone knows about these problematic project worksheets. Our review documentation can be found in the various electronic review platforms, and that would be Grants Portal for the applicants and Grants Manager for NDDES and FEMA Public Assistance. I want to just say here are some of the bigger EHP concerns we have, and these are in no particular order. Clean air. We're concerned with particulate air emissions, and this mostly comes from debris burning or from handling debris or construction projects. Debris is regulated. EHP is happy to advise on stipulations and permitting. We have concerns with the removal, storage, staging of debris, and the implications here relate to floodplain, wetlands, environmental justice, clean water, clean air, endangered species, and historic preservation. The Clean Water Act. These are projects affecting waters of the United States, so-called blue line streams on the United States Geological Survey topo map. There are a variety of best management practices to follow when working in or near water. And this is important. An applicant pre-construction coordination with the Army Corps is required. So depending on the activity, sometime a permit is needed. We have years ago established a one-stop point of contact with the Corps. And I don't know, maybe Brent, you can put up Jason Rentschler's information. Yeah, Jason Rentschler, North Dakota Regulatory Office, and they're located in Bismarck. I tell you, I've known Jason for years, a great guy. He knows you all will be calling him. If you have any issues, call me or Mary, and we can guide you through the process, okay? That's the Army Corps. Floodplains. This is a Presidential Executive Order 11988. EHP looks at short, long-term effects, and we can on floodplains, and we can assist applicants, PA, NDDES with flood mapping, interpretation, and we are absolutely happy to do so. We also have information on floodplain development permits and the application process. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Executive orders for wetlands, that's 11990. We have maps. And y'all should know that all wetlands are not always wet. And there may be related issues of dangerous species habitat and adjacent archaeological sites. Endangered species. Oh boy, this is a big one. So FEMA projects are subject to the Endangered Species Act of 1973. Consultation with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and maybe state tribal departments of fish and game and wildlife can sometime, and honestly, it can sometime be a lengthy and frustrating process. The ESA deals not only with the species, the plants and critters themselves, but also their habitat. And this is directly or indirectly. Applicants, you all, may be required to complete impact minimization measures. The Dakotas have wide migratory bird flyways, and there are sometimes related issues with rural electric cooperative projects. You guys are the pros. You have dealt with avian mitigation measures a lot. This is for raising the height of towers and raising utility poles. Again, we can help you with this. North Dakota has multiple protected species, such as piping plover, nice little shorebird, Dakota skipper butterfly, northern long-eared bat, and many more. So I want to caution you, if you're going to be working in or near water, if you're going to be removing trees or structures or impacting native prairie grasses, please contact your program delivery manager and EHP before you all start work. Consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service may be necessary. We will know when it is, and we will do that consultation. And just note that there may be conditions placed on your project. Early coordination with EHP is important, as the Fish and Wildlife Service, and again, and this is very important, does not consult on completed work. Emergency protective measures are normally allowed to proceed just fine. EHP has information on species per county, and we're happy to share. The National Historic Preservation Act, NHPA. These are, Brent mentioned this, historic buildings, structures, archaeosites, work on Native American reservations. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of that on this particular disaster, but the NHPA also relates to obtaining gravel and other fill. And I'm going to talk about this topic in just a few minutes. Again, just want you all to know we have a truly great long-term relationship with the SHPO and all the tribes. Solid waste disposal is regulated. We work well with the Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Public Health, EPA. They're responsive, cooperative, and they're friends of ours. And be aware that EHP often requires appropriate segregation and or recycling of materials. And this includes culverts. I'll talk about this just in another minute. Now, I want to say there are a few additional red flags for EHP, and these are on projects that's going to require just a little extra close coordination with NDDES, applicants, and FEMA PA. So I would like you all to be on the lookout for, and this would be work completed before EHP input and review. We're happy to help, but it gets dicey if the completed work runs afoul of any EHP requirements. We call these after-the-fact post-project reviews. Fish and Wildlife Service, SHPO, and if there are tribal concerns, they can stop a project really quickly, and we want to avoid this. Another thing we look at is any abrupt changes to a scope of work without EHP being notified. We don't like things coming into our queue that doesn't resemble what was there a month or two or earlier in the process. Program delivery managers are going to keep EHP informed, and we have a great relationship with all the NDDES and FEMA PA folks. Another concern is if there is Section 406, hazard mitigation, or alternative procedures, to be used. All these can be complicated. So again, please involve EHP early and know that we always have our noses in the air for this type of work, because it takes extra EHP coordination review. And this is the same for if there are any improved projects with the potential for impacts to protected resources. So I guess you all get it that EHP does have an important role in disaster recovery, but we do not work alone. We're part of a team supporting the overall mission. And again, I have to say communication is key. EHP often asks a lot of questions. You all get probably sick of us, but we ask questions like, hey, how will that debris specifically be handled? Or where did you get the gravel clay fill? Hey, did you talk to the floodplain administrator, etc.? Understand our reviews and requirements sometimes have time, cost implications for your projects. We may require you all to consider alternatives to your projects, to your proposed projects, and there may be associated permit conditions. These implications are especially important at project closeout. We always look, we scrutinize these pretty heavily. But the good news is that there are many types of projects that only will require minimal EHP reviews because they typically don't have any potential to affect natural cultural resources. Believe me, we want to make certain things go smoothly for everyone. EHP staff will always advise everyone involved about any issues, and we always consult with all the resource regulatory agencies involved in any project. EHP often attends the morning public assistance huddles. The EHP advisor is on the command staff and answers directly to the federal coordinating officer. We are nothing but transparent. Be aware that EHP often must wait to process a PW review to receive consultation letters. And I'm talking about approvals in this case from the Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife Service, State Historic Preservation Office, DEQ, Department of Health, etc. And we always check to see if the required permits have been secured or any attached conditions are met. And this is for completed work and then also at project closeout. Very important. Once again, please understand EHP input and review must be completed prior to work beginning, unless this is an emergency action. If in doubt, the applicants, you can contact your public assistance liaison or even EHP directly, but it's always better to go through your assigned PDMG. Quickly want to say culvert upgrades require a hydraulics study. Has to be completed by a licensed engineer. FEMA normally covers the cost for these studies. Note that removing debris, and Brent said this earlier, you can remove debris from a floodplain, right? And we have floodplain maps, but you cannot store, even temporarily, any debris within a floodplain. All work within what we call the Special Flood Hazard Area, SFHA, any work within the SFHA is going to need, you all are going to need to obtain a floodplain development permit. And that's from the local city or county floodplain administrator. And Brent, maybe just go back. We have the state contact, and we have and I think Brent sent this out. Yeah, and we have a list of all the North Dakota counties, local city, county floodplain administrators. And again, if you guys get into weeds with that or need any advice, we're a phone call away. So I want to say there's a variety of conditions and best management practices for work in or near wetlands. Wetlands are highly scrutinized, and all this is to prevent erosion and sedimentation back into those nice, useful bodies of water. EHP can assist with anything concerning wetlands. Now, another big topic, maybe one of my favorites, gravel, subbase, riprap, other borrow materials. As Brent said, they all have to come from an North Dakota Department of Transportation certified pit with accompanying material source certificates of approval. That's pretty easy. Or you got to provide FEMA, my shop, an emergency borrow location compliance form signed by SHPO that simply states no historic property is affected. For work completed, right? Completed projects come into our review queue using borrow. And a lot of PWs use borrow. EHP review needs to have either you have to supply the pit number or the company name, street address of the commercial source. If it came from a county municipal stockpile, we just need that location. Pretty easy to document that. For work to be completed, EHP is going to condition the project review that all materials has to come from one of the sources cited above. And the applicants in due course are required to supply this information. So let me just tell you, any questions about borrow material? I don't know. I guess I've grown to be a subject matter expert. I like it. I understand how important it really is. And again, we want to get you the money you need, and borrow is expensive. Solid waste. Again, debris must be appropriately separated and disposed in an approved landfill. We can help you out with the locations of those landfills. And this work has to be consistent with North Dakota state guidelines on disposal of storm flood debris, and that's available on their website. So if you, as an applicant, may want to temporarily stage debris on a non-disturbed or otherwise sensitive piece of land, FEMA is going to have to consult with the regulatory agencies for a potential cultural environmental survey before that work occurs. Again, talk to your PDMG, call me or Mary up anytime if you have an idea to work on undisturbed ground. Please avoid staging debris in the floodplain. It is so important not to do so, or on native prairie grasses. You can burn vegetative debris, but you can't burn construction materials. When burning woody debris, you're going to need a permit or a variance, and that's locally derived. Again, we can help you with that. But please note, disposal of ash for burning must be handled according to DEQ regulations, and we have documentation on that. I'm getting to the end here. Culverts. We do a lot of culvert work. North Dakota state law requires culverts, other solid waste, to be disposed of properly. So some simple information here. Please don't crush and bury an old culvert in a roadway. North Dakota doesn't do that stuff, but I tell you, some other states love to do it. It's bad It's bad construction practices for a lot of reasons. Don't leave a damaged culvert on an adjacent property, just leaving it there, unless permission is given for an alternative farm ranching use. Same thing with REC utility poles. We're happy to have them recycled, reused by farmers, ranchers, etc. Just let us know what is going to happen to those items. So we have an executive order for minority low-income populations, and that's environmental justice. This avoids disproportionate or adverse health or environmental effects. FEMA identifies these communities to minimize potential impacts, and we're happy to answer any questions about that. So I'm going to conclude by just simply stating EHP staff is here to help, and I think you all know that. You get it. Everyone at the NDDES knows how to find us. And I tell you, I cannot hide from Justin Mesner, Brent Call, Jerry Miller, etc., no matter how hard I try to. Finally, one last item. EHP reviews are coordinated through FEMA NDDES public assistance. Our reviews may sometimes have compliance conditions attached to a project worksheet. All these conditions that you all have to pay attention to can be found in grants portal, as well as on the EHP record of environmental consideration attached to public assistance project review. Again, any questions, let us know. We're here to help. We love working in good old North Dakota. And Brent, that's all I got. I'll put my smiling face back up here. Any questions? I could at least try to answer.
And I don't see any in the chat right now either, Charlie. So if anything else comes up, though, are you going to be able to stick on the line for a few more minutes?
Oh, yeah. Heck yes.
Okay. All right.
Thanks,
Perfect. Thanks, Charlie.
Yep.
All right. So it is back over to me. I'm going to handle the hazard mitigation portion of this, and I believe this is the last segment of the presentation here today. So I'll try to get through this pretty quickly, considering we're going on almost 2 hours now. Before I hit into the 404 mitigation, I did want to step back just to talk about 406 mitigation one more time, and just make sure everybody's understanding the difference. So there is also called 406 mitigation, which Brent and Charlie have both hit on. And that is mitigation that is specific to what got damaged during the disaster event. So, for example, a great example is power lines that got knocked down. If there is something that we can do to help prevent those damages from happening again in the future, we can try to do that, even if it's going to end up costing obviously more than what the repairs would be. So a good example for power poles is maybe we could bury the lines, or we could put in some dead stops, or we could help put in anchors, maybe even just increase the size of some of the poles. All of those different activities can help prevent these future impacts and strengthen your guys' infrastructure and increase the resilience of the state. And so I really do want to just make everyone aware of that anything you guys can think of, please let us know. Please work with us on it. I know there are some RECs we've already talked to about, they had a few segments where they didn't have to put the poles back up as of right now because they were more of like a loop or for redundancy purposes. And that's awesome, because then we can take a look at, just burying those lines straight up instead of, going back and doing it after the fact. But we still have that option. Even if you guys had already done repairs on segments because you had to, we can still look at those segments and see what we could do to help you with even still burying them potentially. So just keep that in mind. You'll be able to talk to your state staff member about that. But if you have any questions about those as well, please reach out to me or Todd Jers. He's our state mitigation officer, or Brent anytime. We'll gladly discuss it with you. So what about things that did not happen because of this specific disaster? FEMA also has programs for that. So if there were, any interest in, doing mitigation not tied to this event, there are a few different options. The first one is this hazard mitigation grant program. Now, this actually is tied to the event, but it does not have to be related to damages from the event. That's what 406 is for. For this one, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is something that we request as a part of our declaration that goes up through FEMA to the president, and we ask for it to be made available statewide. So it's also available to applicants that weren't even impacted by this storm event at all. The budget for that program is based on how big the disaster event ends up being. Whatever the disaster ends up costing as a total, we actually get 20% of that put aside specifically for this program. We get 20% because we are an enhanced mitigation plan state. Other states would only get 15. 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but the bigger the disaster is, the bigger that chunk of money ends up being. And there's a lot of good activities that we can do. We can do regular construction projects. We can do mitigation plans. We can do engineering and design studies. And then we can also do what's called 5% initiative projects. I always call that community beneficial projects, like putting in shelter generators or putting in early warning sirens, things that make perfect sense, but you can't necessarily quantify that it's actually going to, save lives or things like that. But those are still obviously eligible under this program as well. The cost share is also the exact same as the PA program for this one. It is 75% federal, 10% state, and then 15% local. Next slide, Brent. Perfect. And then, so the other two programs that we also utilize, and they actually closed as of today, but they open every year. So we'll actually have the next round will open up in October, November of 24, and then close around January, February of 25. But these ones, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program is called BRIC. And then Flood Mitigation Assistance is FMA. They are nationally competitive. This is more of the traditional grant program that most people think of. You develop an application, you send it in, and then it goes against all the other states, all the other potential applicants, and FEMA ultimately selects what they feel are the best projects and then awards the money from there. We've actually done very well under these national programs, even though they are competitive. We've done very well for North Dakota. In fact, under FMA just this last year, we were number one in per capita dollars that we received. We were third nationally in terms of total dollars, but when you took that against our state's population, we were number one by a pretty high margin. Both of those are funded. Well, BRIC is funded through FEMA. FMA is funded through the National Flood Insurance Program, which makes sense because in the name, it has to be a flood mitigation project. But the other one on that is that there is no state share on the national programs. It's just 75% federal, 25% local. Like I said, very successful in the state. The first program there, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, you can see has been the overwhelming program that we've used because we've just had so many disasters in North Dakota. Going back to 1997, we've done 333 projects, as you can see, with about 236 million that we've been able to utilize across the state. PDM is a program that doesn't exist anymore. It actually became BRIC. So when BRIC got released here in 2020, PDM went away. But prior to that, we'd had 90 projects totaling 36 million, and then we'll start putting in the BRIC number on our future events here as well. And then FMA, this was old. We had 3 projects approved prior to this. It was in 2009. We actually have 2 projects that were selected just this last year. Big dollar projects, one for the city of Bismarck and one for the city of Mandan, both dealing with flood control works. And those, they haven't officially been approved yet, but they should be approved here soon. And then that number will get updated and almost reaching 100 million, just about, once those 2 projects get approved. As you can see, over 400 projects, over 285 million in grant funds. One really nice thing to point out for mitigation as well is they did a study here a few years ago, and they identified, and they looked specifically at these programs. And what they did was they identified that for every $1 put into mitigation, on average, it saved $6.54 in the state of North Dakota in long-term response and recovery costs. So having to do extra work always sounds daunting. Everybody already has a busy schedule and they already have things they need to do. But if you are able to put in that extra work, increase your resiliency, it's going to have a long-term benefit for you. And I just always like to put that out because there's not as many opportunities out there like that as there should be. Next slide. Excuse me. So this list comes directly out of the Hazard Mitigation Program and Policy Guide. And it's basically just a breakdown of all the different types of activities we can do. In the state, we've done over 1,400 acquisitions of flood-prone homes. Once they're purchased or they're acquired, those lots turn into green space in perpetuity so that nobody can ever get back into that situation again. And most of those have always been in the Red River Valley and around the Devil's Lake Basin. We've done a lot of localized and non-localized flood risk reduction. That's like difference between levees and flood walls for communities versus like a flood wall around a specific building, like a water treatment plant or a wastewater plant. We've done a lot of generators, critical facility generators especially. But I always like to point out in the bottom right-hand corner, miscellaneous or other. The one really nice thing about this is, there's all these ideas that you can do, but if you have a wild idea, something that maybe nobody's ever thought of before, but it would work, FEMA will at least entertain you. They'll at least hear you out. They'll hear what your project is, and if you can show that it's actually going to work, they'll consider funding it. The worst case they're ever going to say is no. So I always like pointing that out, because just because it's not listed in here doesn't mean it isn't something that we could try to fund. Next slide. And I think this is my last one. So our actual state mitigation officer is named Todd Jers. He works under me and oversees those different programs. And he's kind of a counterpart to Brent. Brent is the public assistance officer, and then Todd is the state hazard mitigation officer. So between the two of them, they cover pretty much a lot of our recovery and then mitigation programs. But anybody has any questions, you could reach out to me, but I'll probably end up having you get in touch with Todd as well, so that he can make sure that he's, monitoring and managing projects and the amount of funding that we're going to get, and his contact information is available right there. So with that, Brent, I think I'll pass it over to you. I did have one more question, because I know we are recording this, and we're gonna put the recording out once it's on YouTube. I think we also send out a copy of your slides, right? Oh, Brent.
We put them we make them available on our website. Now I was going to go over that next here.
That's what I thought. All right, thank you much.
Okay. Yeah, we're just bear with us. We're almost done here, guys. Just going to go over a couple of resources here to help you find anything you need. This is going to be a link to the Public Assistance Policy Guide version 4. This is the current version of that guide. It's about a 200-page guide that gives you everything you really need to know about FEMA and the policies and things like that. This is something that we look at every day. I'm going to kind of show you where this is at. That link will take you to our PA link resource page for the state. You can find a lot of good resources there. The biggest one, if anybody does have time today, look at that recovery transition meeting handout. It's designed to be reviewed once all of your projects are obligated. But again, just to have that stuff in the back of your mind is always good when you're walking through this grant. We talk about the initial public notice, screen sheet, things like that, documentation, preparation, a lot of good stuff out there that we've been compiling over the years. Last slide here, and I'll show you where that link is and kind of how to navigate that page. Just our points of contact here, me, Justin, Darren Hansen, Jerry Miller, he's going to be our task force lead. He's on here today, monitoring, got a good group of PDMGs here, a lot of experience, 15 years plus. Some of our PDMGs have been working for us. So you're definitely in good hands. And if you have any questions or any issues whatsoever at any time, give me a call. I'm happy to listen to everything that you have for us. Just again, real quick, I will share. This is that PA page. When you follow that link and you're going to go into the public assistance page. Well, let me kind of go home real quick. When you get that link, it'll take you here. And then you want to go into this public assistance section right here. And you're going to see a lot of resources that you can use that you may or may not want to use here. But again, a lot of good resources right here. Just follow that link. We'll be updating the applicant briefing slides right here, as well as the video. Once we get that on our YouTube, you'll be able to find what we just went over here the past couple hours, the slides and everything else, the green sheet, the initial public notice that Charlie went over. So we won't keep you here. I know this is a long meeting, but right now we'll open that up to questions. And if not, If we don't have any questions, expect a call from a PDMG once you get that request for public assistance in. Like I said, right now we only have 2 in there. So if you haven't gotten that done, if you don't have that email from Justin, let us know right away. We'll get that to you. We do need that RPA before we can get the ball rolling here. But once we have that RPA filed and moving forward, we'll get a PDMG assigned to you, and they'll be reaching out to you as soon as we can. So with that, we'll open up to questions.
Hey, Brent, it's Nadine. I know some of you have gone in and tried to register. If you haven't been in the FEMA portal before, just get a hold of me. Justin did provide my email and my phone number. I will get you registered and get the invite sent to you so you can do the RPA. It's a lot less time consuming and the invite gets to you a lot faster than if you try to register. If you do go in and see your company's entity name and there's no staff members on file, again, get a hold of me. I will get you in the system and get the invitation sent out to you so that you can go in and do your RPA. Like all the electrical contractors, you're going to have to supply your documentation for a PNP at that point also. And make sure you have your UEI number, the unique entity ID number. If you don't, go to sam.gov. It is required. It replaces the DUNS number. And we got to have that going forward, and so does FEMA for any payments going out. And I can walk you through that too. And Brent's showing it right here how to do it.
Okay, thanks, Nadine.
Thanks.
I was going to say the same thing. Thanks, Nadine, because we did actually have one of the RECs reached out to us and had been trying to also register. And it turned out FEMA had actually tried to add quite a few organizations that we have worked with in the past into their new, grants portal website to make sure that, they're trying to take all of those into consideration. And it kind of messed it up because they were in there, but they didn't have any people assigned to them. So we ended up having to work with Nadine and got them added in. So if that is the case, if you tried to register and it was giving you error messages or things just weren't working, reach out to Nadine and we'll get it squared away for you guys. But the other thing I just wanted to add was there's 2 things. For the RPAs, if we start getting closer to that deadline, we're probably going to start cold calling everybody and just make sure that you guys are going to get yours in there. Yeah, obviously there's, I believe, 7 different RECs that we are expecting to have RPAs, and then there was a few cities and a couple of counties that we are aware of. But as we move forward, the closer we get to that deadline date, the obviously bigger issue it'll be if we can't get that stuff done. So we'll be reaching out to you guys as needed. Oh, and then the last thing, when we first started the meeting, there was a few folks that had dialed in that weren't muted, and I ended up muting you through Microsoft Teams. If you end up having a specific question, this would be to those people that had dialed in, you may have to hit *6 to unmute. It's just one of those fun little Microsoft Teams little tricks. So, but yeah, I'll just open it back up for any questions. And I saw one in the chat, but Jerry already handled that one. So yeah. Let's see if there's any more. Okay, I'll take that as a no for now. And we appreciate you guys, sitting through this long meeting. It's like I said before, it is a requirement. I always feel bad for Brent having to do this because we have to do it for every single, disaster event. We've had, I think, 10 of them in just the last 4 years. So he's had to do this quite a bit. Yep. To Jim from Cass County, he just asked about the YouTube video, and it'll be sent. We're going to have our communications team put that on our YouTube channel. I believe they're going to work on that this afternoon and then get me the link. So I'm expecting I should have the link out to everybody by end of this week at the latest. I'm hoping that it would be today, if not tomorrow. But I think with that, thanks, Jim. I think with that, we'll go ahead and close this up. And like I mentioned before, if anybody has any questions, please reach out to us at any time. We want to make sure that we're helping you guys get through this whole process. There's tons of different requirements and red tape and EHP requirements that have to be taken into consideration. And that's one of our purposes of being here, is to try to walk you through all of that. So if you did have a question and you maybe just didn't want to bring it up on the meeting here, just give us a buzz or shoot us an email after the fact, and we'll do our best to help you guys right away. But with that, Brent, I'll turn it maybe back over to you if you had anything else to say, but I think we're good to go.
Yep. No, nothing to add. But as soon as we see those RPAs in, come in, we'll get a PDMG assigned to you right away. Like I said, we were hoping to get that by Monday, but these RPAs do take a couple of days. So if we're just filling them out today, it might not be till middle of next week before those PDMGs call you. But we are patiently standing by.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. We will start getting all this stuff updated on our website and get this YouTube video out as soon as we can. And we'll be talking more soon. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we hit it 2 hours. Oh, no, it's 2 hours and 1 minute now, but it was pretty darn close. All right.
No, you
Thanks,
started you started at 10:01, so you're fine.
That's true.
How about we end early then?
Too late.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.